I think we can now start. So, welcome to the semi-final of the Thessaloniki Open 2014. The motion is a very long motion and is, this House believes that international courts should punish states with the capacity to prevent crimes against humanity, but which do not do so, e.g. the US in Rwanda. The teams are not going to remember this, but in first prop I know for a fact that it is...
Miloš. You know for a fact?
I know it's Miloš, but the team name
Champagne Socialist.
Yeah, the Champagne Socialist. In first op it's Deree X. In second prop,
Yolo.
yes, clap them, and in second op it is... Exactly. And we are Emilia, Manos, Carlo, and Katerina, and me. So, I think that's everything. Can everybody please make sure that your mobile phones are silenced? Please. Also, this is a room with some pretty terrible acoustics. Your whispering will be heard by the speakers and will stop them from doing their work. So try to be quiet. And apart from that, who's timekeeping? That's probably one. Is there someone timekeeping within that? You're doing the timekeeping? You'll get a triple knock on 7 minutes and 15, which means sit down. Otherwise, may the best teams go through. No further ado, I invite the Prime Minister to propose the case that stands in his name.
Okay, that's a lot of people, but... Okay. Mr. Speaker, sorry. Mr. Speaker, we live in a world when one general needs to stand up and say next things. USA specifically needs to reconsider their own possibility in the world. What it actually means to be a police officer. It means two things. First of all, you like to perceive yourself as you have higher moral standards in the world. And second of all, to actually have soft power and ergo some interest from it in that position. Now, of course, we're not limiting this to the United States. We're just using the example of that general who stated what everyone is thinking of when we talk about obligation to intervene in a situation which is so dramatically influential about and so important in this world. Now, to give some context to this debate, we're going to analyze two examples. First one is Rwanda with the USA. Second of all is Holland with the Srebrenica genocide and what actually happened there. In the situation with Srebrenica, we already have some rulings where courts said though the Holland was guilty of not preventing genocide to happen. Now, when we realized what actually happened in this situation, these countries did not enter to help or didn't enter in fully their possibility to enter to save these people who were in terrible condition, in the world's worst conditions to actually be found of, as we perceive. Let's enter to the model. What I would like to is that punishment and who will going to do this. First of all, what that punishment means. It means that you're guilty because of to see this and to actually go through with this. First of all, you had capacity. What we mean next three things. First, military capacity to enter and to stop, to freeze this. We can say that these countries, mainly from West, have this power. For example, we give you the USA, who demolished the Iraqi army in the one day with 14 tanks losing nothing. They lost in guerrilla warfare, but we believe when you enter even more military power, you will be able to stop it and to freeze it and to destroy those who are actually entering this. Second point, you have enough info. We are saying that every country in the world have info, and we believe there should be an obligation of sharing info. Even further on, we do have ways how, MI6 and Mossad actually change information in these situations and actually telling their governments that something terrible is going to happen. And third of all, you can be found guilty of the context. If you see that one ethnic majority in one country is arming itself up, if you see that someone actually gave them that weapons, you have obligation to stop this to happen further on. No, thank you. To the second point, of further analysis of this, what punishment means, it means you will be found guilty and saying that in the name of the court of criminal justice, of the international justice, but also it means you must be pay reparations. It means you will be after this, so even if those countries do not enter in, we're ensuring the best outcome scenario for those who are endangered. It means you will have to pay nation building, peacemaking process and social problems like education and those type of things. But this is the difference, and this Tony Zini talked about. You will not go out by the cheap. You will need to re-enter with the real money. We will actually, even if necessary, take half of the budget of your state to actually fund and to do fully with these programs. Not yet, Mr. Shapiro. Now, it means that these programs will also not be done by your people. It will be done by the UN experts or bureaucrats who know what they do. We will do this as objectively as we can. Analysis of our punishment is it who will do it so. It will be done by criminal court, international court, international court of justice. It means next treating. It will be objective as possible, info on research they can do. It will be as neutral as possible because it will have to explain their decision making to the whole world to send a message of solidarity. It means in the UN we should need to step up and to show and to create that sense of obligation you need to enter and to save this and to fight against this nature of humanity to prevent this further happening. Yes, Helen.
Can you explain to me, if I'm a capable state and I became a capable state for the vast majority of reasons, why is that in any way related to any conflict, and why was that my pre-intention when I was building my capacities?
Sorry, can you repeat it? I lost.
I became capable because I had some ideas and I wanted to pursue something which is not in any way related with the crimes against humanity happening. Why am I obligated to intervene?
Because you have capacity. I will explain it further on, even if you should put this value of humanity over your self-interest, and I will enter to my part in solidarity in this and the next analysis. Now, I want to analyze one notion, and that's the crime. What's the nature of this crime? It's the nature against humanity. What does it actually mean? Ethnic cleansing or the genocide which is happening throughout the world. It doesn't just go by the deaths that are happening there. It doesn't go by those you are targeting who are defenseless in those situations, begging for help, no other reason. It's happening the way when you target someone just for being that someone. It means you're attacking someone on the pure premise it's nothing more than on the other side, even though he's the perfect natural human being. Problem with that situation, when you attack those, you're attacking humanity as whole and the values that we would like to postpone upon. We would like to present and to perceive ourselves. It's already one of the interests that states actually promoting by their own everyday social contracts. Either you should help each other through the legal framework, through everything. You see the obligation of people entering. You need to help those in need. Even having some sort of legal framework, you have obligation to show and to prove and to give to those necessary help. If you see someone drowning, you need to go in and help him in order to have the punishment. Now, let's analyze that necessary help in these states, why we should be targeted most in these our cases. It's that necessary in 4 levels. First, they can to do this without their massive harm upon themselves. They have capacity. Second point is they should do it. Now, why? First of all, they have power of them being big powers in the world. We're obviously talking about USA, about Russia, about European Union, about every one of them. They have capacity. And they use, and they use that soft power to gain interest on themselves through economic power, to showing, we give you stability, we're the ones you want to trade off, and further on. They get some interest of those states. In the situation when someone who you get your interest from gets in hurt or in need, you have obligation to help because you had something given to you from them. Second point is about responsibility. Either it can come from your being colonized, and you actually started that ethnic diversity, or your perception of yourself as a world policeman. Now we come again to the words of Tony Zini, who said, we are hypocrites because we like to see ourselves as someone who has bigger values in the society. We like to say we're the one who protects you, we're the moral high grounders, we're the one who perceive world and who shaped it actually because of calling themselves world police officers. What does it mean? When you do such a thing, when you should walk the walk, that means you should stand behind yourself. For example, if people actually believe that, we have the next generation of Americans who are actually saying that taking away from Somalia, taking away from Rwanda was one of the biggest mistakes that the USA ever did. So USA does have even an obligation to its own citizens to enter and intervene. What have I shown you today is that these crimes needs to be stopped. We show you a mechanism of supporting this, actually preventing them, and even if they happen, how to deal with them better. Thank you.
Let's thank the Prime Minister for his speech, and now invite the Leader of the Opposition to define their case.
Okay. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, from this side of the House, we believe that we should not punish states with the capacity to prevent crimes against humanity, but they didn't do so because, first of all, we don't clearly see how the capacity can be actually be conceptualized as a term and actually assessed. We cannot see how this prevention mechanism is actually something that is going to be effective and efficient. And finally, because we oppose the idea of the world police. But before I elaborate more on these three interesting points, let me rebuttal some of the points that we heard from the first speech, from the Prime Minister. So we heard a method, a way that this thing is going to this thing is going to grow with. They told us that capacity we mean more or less that you have military and some information, but they didn't elaborate more on these things. They just mentioned that, of course, the UN experts are going to take care of some things. Well, great job at picking UN. I mean, they have a great history of dealing successfully with things. And then they mentioned a lot of things about, you know what, we have the moral obligation because we are a great power. With great power comes great responsibility. Well, thank you, Spider-Man fans, for coming up with this thing. But the actual truth is that we don't actually see why, if you have such great power, it means that you must serve humanity and human causes all around the world. Also, the third point of the rebuttal is about their responsibility. Because from this side of the House, we believe that, of course, you are responsible as a country to your citizens. We don't see why you have to all of a sudden go out there and start looking, who is actually going to commit a crime against humanity because I have to prevent him by any means. We believe that you must focus on your citizens first, and we can talk about the issue about helping all the others all around the world later. But enough with the rebuttal. Let's see, not yet. Let's see about mention capacity, prevention, and world police. Let's start with the capacity. As I already told you, ladies and gentlemen, we don't actually understand this moral obligation. Why this thing? Why do we have, let's say that I am the US, why do I have the moral obligation to intervene and stop a crime? Have the capacity, even if I have some military information. Why must I believe that there is such a higher thing, that such a higher philosophy that is going to make me actually go out there and prevent this? We don't clearly, we don't believe that with such great power, the responsibility comes in order to help some other country out there. Of course, you can have your own problems. You can have problems, and you must focus first on actually serving your own citizens. Otherwise, and this is why it is crucial here, they are stating that, you know what, you must prioritize the others. Well, the risk of actually getting punished, because let's say that I'm the US and I will have to make a deal between focusing on my issues or going out there preventing things, because if I don't prevent them enough, these guys will come and tell me that, you know what, I'm going to punish you now because you had the capacity to prevent it. Well, I don't believe that as a country I have to make all the time decisions between what to focus on, where to focus. Do I have to focus in my country and allocate my budget and my resources in my country for my citizens, or do I have to keep, let's say, something from happening because I have to keep some resources and some budget because some crime is going to take place, and if I don't prevent it, these guys are going to tell me, we see that you have the capacity, you are going to get punished. Then it is about the prevention. First of all, is this thing going to act? First of all, we see that it is a bit difficult to actually prevent this. The thing is that the dictator or someone is not calling you up and tells you, hey, tomorrow at 6 o'clock I'm planning a genocide, maybe you can come and prevent it. These things don't usually have a schedule on the way that they're being committed. So how exactly is this prevention going to take place? Do I have to be alert as the US, as Germany, as France, or whatever else these capable countries are? Do I have to be alert constantly and 24/7 in checking up on whoever might commit a genocide, whoever might commit a crime against humanity? Because also, what about the result when we're talking about the prevention? Do we care about the effectiveness? Are we going to say that I'm not going to punish you because you are effective in stopping a crime from being committed? Or are we going to value the incentive and the effort, ladies and gentlemen? What if I'm the US and I say, send a troop there, but unfortunately he didn't do anything? Well, I had the incentive, I tried to do it, I made some effort, but didn't achieve anything. Are we looking about the result? Are we looking about effectiveness here, or are we just going to value incentives and effort before we are actually going to punish someone? I'll take you.
Okay, first of all, of course you are warned. The US has the intelligence network to be informed about those things, and if you're not, the international courts will find that and will not punish you. That's why we added the international court.
So the US, in general, whichever country fulfills the criteria from now on becoming a country that has the capacity, must allocate some more resources in actually having a CIA, FBI, and everything, and all other resources in order to be actual on the same level of telling us what we have to do and where crime is going to be committed, so we can have something out there. We believe that we can do much better things with our budget and our resources. But finally, ladies and gentlemen, the world police thing, because I believe, and we believe from this side of the house, that this particular phenomenon is something that we must not justify. We believe that we have all these reasons and all these debates over whether the US must intervene with the Middle East, whether the US must intervene there and reallocate things, intervene in any kind of way, the political or military. And we are constantly telling again and again that this is something not justified, because we cannot, like US, for example, or any other big power country, to actually act as the world police, to act as the global sheriff. We believe that we shall not justify by this motion what these guys are proposing, because of course reasons come up here, and they might tell you that, all of a sudden this particular plan is going to backfire. How is it going to backfire? Because maybe I can find potential crimes and potential dictators or regimes that might end up causing, that might commit crimes against the humanity, and therefore I will have to allocate troops. Therefore I may have to start investigating them more, because they might potentially try to do something like this. Ladies, overall, we believe that because the capacity and the moral obligation thing are so vague things that they have not been justified, because the prevention and the retrospective punishment that they're proposing is such vague, of course, and because we are opposing world police phenomenon, we're proudly opposing today's motion. Thank you.
Thank you to the leader of the opposition. We now return to the government benches. I'd like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue their case.
Thank you. The sad thing about our world that we want to change from side government is that we have the logistical and military resources to stop bad things from happening, but the structure of our international relations and the way nation states function and decide upon whether they should intervene or not is bad and is problematic, and we want to change this with this kind of incentive and with this kind of punishment. So a couple of things. I'm going to further explain you and establish the responsibility of these states. Also, I will talk about how will prevent this from happening in the future more than the current status quo, and we'll talk about how this will change the perception of interventions and responsibility to protect. But firstly, a couple of points of rebuttal. Well, firstly, they say, you cannot know whether this kind of crime is going to really happen. Like you cannot really predict this kind of things. What we have a couple of answers from that. Firstly, you have intelligence and you have the information about some military gaining more power or they having plans to commit some action. Also, you have the general atmosphere in the society. Before the genocide, there is almost always a big tension in the society and threats that happen before the violence actually escalates. Also, this doesn't happen in one day. Like if these kind of things starts, you can still intervene before it ends and before all of the crimes happen. So you can intervene before it escalates to the end. So we don't think that states are actually incapable of recognizing this sort of thing can happen. Also, they say, how are you going to conceptualize like this capacity, like it is only a military capacity, etc. How they're going to how are we going to have this information? Well, this is why we have courts that define and measure these kinds of criteria. So if you say that there is a high probability that if by the information that you had at some point, you could have, a reasonable person could have that there is a big possibility of it happening, we think that the court should rule that they did in fact had a high possibility of preventing and of actually realizing that something bad is going to happen. And now on the responsibility, and this is also going to be a rebuttal to the first opposition, because they say, and mostly in rhetorical questions, like they don't explain you why we don't have moral responsibility, they just ask, but why do we have the moral responsibility? And I will tell you that. Firstly, because these people who find themselves in this situation have no other defense and have no way of protecting themselves. So they don't have, in a vast majority of cases, when an ethnic group or a religious group happen to be a victim of a crime against humanity, it is in many cases it is the minority in that society. It is the minority that doesn't have political or military power. They are left to themselves. This is why we think that this kind of a good Samaritan law should happen, because we think that they are completely left alone and they have no capacity to help themselves. On the other hand, we have the capacity as countries who have this kind of military, who have this kind of military. Secondly, we think that it is legitimate for courts to determine moral standards in our society. We think that it is okay for courts to promote solidarity if solidarity doesn't exist. Just because solidarity between nations doesn't always exist doesn't mean that it is a good thing. We think that it is good for courts to promote the idea that nations have a responsibility to help groups of people or other nations that are at danger of a big harm. Why? Because the harm is immense. Because crimes against humanity are one of the worst things that can happen to you as a person or as a group. So we think that it is of the highest importance and highest moral priority for us as nation states to do this kind of things. Why we don't do it in all instances? Because we have our own structural problems that prevent us from doing this. For example, a public doesn't want to go to war at that particular point. The public thinks that it doesn't want to send its own soldiers to die for a cause that they are not sure it is going to happen, etc., etc. There is no public support, or the generals think that it might not be a good thing at that point. We think that these reasons are not good enough reasons and not good enough justification for these states to not do this. And we have this kind of incentive, this kind of punishment to overcome those problems in decision making on the level of individual states in order to motivate them to intervene.
Sir,
yes.
if I sent my sons and daughters to war where they died for some country I wanted nothing to do with because I was scared of punishment, am I actually likely to feel more solidarity with them, or hating those mother effing whatever country we're in because they couldn't get their S together?
You're feeling solidarity about someone is not as important as preventing that someone from being killed. So we think that the perception that is going to happen after the intervention, and you not feeling solidarity with those people. When we were talking about solidarity, we were talking about the powers, the military and the heads of states, not about the people who live in those states. I don't care what the people of the USA think about going to Rwanda if they like it or not. It is the problem of the generals or the head of states that put their own interest of those citizens above their solidarity with those people who live there, and they are on the positions of power in which they can prevent it. Why will this prevent this? Because when you have a punishment and you have a court ruling saying that you are guilty as a country, it weakens your soft power. It creates more media pressure. So we think that this kind of narrative that you are guilty, that you are as a country, as a society of not preventing so many people being killed, putting a blame on you, is going to create more incentives for governments, more incentive for parties, more incentives for generals to actually, when these kinds of things happen, actually make a decisions to prevent this. So you have a monetary incentive of not being punished and not having to pay a large amounts of money if this kinds of stuff happens, but also the incentive of not being after the conflict partly blamed for so many people being dead. Okay, so We prove to you that one, there is a responsibility of these countries that it should be established because these people can't help themselves, because you have the capacity to help them. Secondly, because this will prevent this from happening in the future. And thirdly, because the structure of our international relations and disables us from helping them, from helping these people in the status quo. Because of all these reasons,
I'd like to thank the Deputy Prime Minister. We now return to the opposition bench, whom I'd like to invite the Deputy Leader to their case. And order, please. As I said, terrible acoustics here.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I go on telling you why this will actually go on and worsen things, because it's an issue of sovereignty here. Secondly, because there will be the fear of punishment of the third parties which have not intervened, or even the parties that are in the division or whatever and have not prevented the humanity crime to happen. And third, because it actually stigmatizes as guilty the accused party, and that will actually put a stigma of the blame on that specific party, worsening things again. I would like to first rebut some of the points heard by the opening gov so far. So they said that we have the UN people and all these specialists that can objectively go on and make the decision of who is actually to be punished as a country for not preventing such incidences. And they said that this is going to be based on these countries explaining the decision-making process they had and the information available in their hands and everything, on top of what Theodoris actually told you here today, which was that this information is not that transparent, it's not that available to all the parties and to all the stakeholders and everything. We also have decision processes being taken under very, very tense and pressured situations. And we know that those kind of decision processes are completely different from the ones that are actually taken under regular situations for countries and everything. So this is a small peculiarity of the situation. This does not justify the failure to intervene being a crime by a whole country. Then about the whole responsibility argument they keep on bringing again and again, and the whole situation about the minorities and everything that are left on their own and with the capacity not being able to help themselves and everything. We say that by intervening, you just put a full stop on the problem at this specific point of time. So you create a need of countries or the countries involved needing to actually go and stop the situation every time it goes on to burst or anything is about to happen. And it does not solve the very basic and rooted issue. So there are global organisms. There are many global organisms and everything. The UN and parties like that who could involve in such situations, who could try to actually solve and tackle the issue and everything, and we should not concentrate all our effort in the punishment of the parties that did not prevent, for some reason, the crime to actually happen. Now, no, thank you. Moving on to my constructive case. Okay, so no, thank you. Okay, so crimes and criminal activity that actually go against humanity and all those things in such a range have this peculiarity, like the genocide, the Indian Pakistan, Iraq, US thing, everything, that they are incidents of very specific socio-cultural, historic, national, or whatever conflicts and divisions. And these are the things that actually lead in the end to the crimes against humanity and to such massively, and to such an extensive, massive appeal of these incidences. So we believe that in those cases, sovereignty issues are important. Each country deals with its own home, with its own issue. And if it can go on and help other countries that are in conflict or whatever, or they, of course, are welcome and should do so. But that is a completely different thing than going on and actually accusing deciding that a country is guilty and should be punished if it did not do so, if it did not intervene and get involved in such a situation. So this goes on and creates a situation where it didn't even exist. So if we have two countries in a war situation or whatever, and we have a third country that could actually go militarily and intervene and wherever and stop this issue, and it doesn't, this country this country gets in the whole situation, and more stakeholders are involved in all these things, and we actually go and create tents among nations that didn't even exist before, because we had two parties. Now we have 3, we have 4, we have the other 10 that could intervene and could stop the situation, but did not go on and do so. So we do not think that it's justifiable to go on and actually punish countries that looked at their house, that looked at their resources, and we don't think that we should, by legal force, accuse them if we do not prevent such crimes of happening. Secondly, the fear of punishment. And what we actually mean here is that parties that are partially involved in conflicts and everything, or are completely uninvolved but could prevent, if we say that they should intervene no matter what, because they're going to be punished if they don't do so, it is actually creating a sense of fear that always I should have my eyes on the situation to actually go and intervene, because otherwise I'm going to face the international courts and everything. And why is this bad for us? This is bad because it puts more attention in the issue. It makes things much more tense. It makes things with much more massive involvement. It leads to tremendously more catastrophic events and situations. In the sense that we do have the conflict, we do have the situations going on, but we also have those 5, 10, 15, or whatever parties that could prevent, but did not. So you see how massively that thing actually expands and happens. And third of all, the stigmatization, because you are guilty, you are of blame because you did not actually go and help. And what do we mean by this? We mean that when two parties are in conflict, there is hatred among them. There is this whole division. There is all this situation going on. And we actually go and blame some other party or one of these two parties that could actually stop a humanity crime of happening or anything, and does not. That goes on and makes the division more strong, and makes the situation more tense, and makes the root of the actual crime and division and everything much more of an importance. So that leads to a situation of continuing all this division and conflict and everything. So what do we tell you here today? We told you that actually it's a sovereignty issue that actually is going to worsen things. We said that it's going to become a fear of punishment to the parties that are not involved, and we're going to make them to have to involve in each case. And thirdly, because it actually stigmatizes a specific party of being of blame, not to prevent such occurrences. Thank you very much.
Very much to the Deputy Leader. We are now moving to the second half of the table. To continue the government case, I'd like to invite their member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Now, before I go on with my extension, I'd like to address the issues we've heard so far from the side of the opposition. And ladies and gentlemen, what have they been telling us so far? Both of the previous speakers from the side of the opposition. Their main line is that a very complex problem, it's hard to judge a few issues, so we just shouldn't get involved. That's their main line on the side of the opposition. And we're saying, ladies and gentlemen, that's why we said that the International Court of Justice is the one that's going to decide on these issues. We think it's quite up to the task to decide. We think it has done so in the past, in terms of putting blame on genocides and stuff. We think it is a court that can decide on those issues. So we don't see a problem there. But more specifically, tell us, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, she had this idea, which quite frankly I find a bit insulting, that she says, well, you know, all your mechanism is going to do is just stop the problem at that point in time and not solve the underlying issues. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if that means saving 1 million lives, for example, I'm fine with that, right? We'll deal with the underlying issue later. Right now, it's important to save that 1 million lives. Then we'll see. No, thank you. Right? And then she went on and told us how after a while it's going to get too huge because like 20 countries are going to be involved and all that. And we're saying no, ladies and gentlemen. Really, in reality, the countries that we're talking about here are 2 or 3, maybe a handful, right? It's the US, it's China, it's Russia, it's, let's say, more or less the UN Security Council, like the permanent members. That's the countries we're talking about. It's not all the countries in the world. Greece cannot go in and stop a genocide in Africa. It just can't. It's barely managing to stop a genocide in Greece. But anyway, and the last thing that we heard from the side, no thank you, from the side of opposition is all this blame and putting blame on people is going to make the original conflict worse somehow. Which, first of all, they didn't explain, ladies and gentlemen. But also, we'd like to say that we don't think it's going to make it worse. We think actually it's going to make it much better, or at least less intense. We think those countries, those parties involved are less likely to commit those crimes. Why? Because they know that the US is going to come in and bomb the hell out of them, right? Who wants that? Nobody wants that. So they're not going to commit those crimes. That's what we're saying, and I'll expand on that in my constructive case later on. And well, not later on, now. Okay. Moving on to my extension, right? I'm going to talk to you today mainly about 2 things. We've heard from the first half issues about whether we have the obligation to intervene and whether we have the moral high ground and all of those issues. And the first proposition did an excellent job explaining to you and to everyone here why we do have that obligation, why those countries have that moral obligation to intervene and to prevent those killings, right? I'm going to talk to you a bit more about how it's going to be effective, how our measure is actually going to work. And I'm also going to focus quite a bit on the UN, because we think this is very important in this case. Right? First of all, the incentive. How what we're saying is going to work, ladies and gentlemen. Right? First of all, but when the US, for example, if it doesn't intervene, it's going to go through all this scrutiny, through the International Court of Justice and all that. It has an incentive to first place. It has the incentive to intervene, both because usually restitution is much more expensive than just stopping the crime before happening, right? And they and they want to avoid this extra cost, but also because of the reaction of the international, ladies and gentlemen. Even the US is not really comfortable with ignoring decisions of the International Court. Go.
Question. Do you prefer a world where fewer countries sign treaties about the International Criminal Court or more countries sign treaties participating?
I prefer a world where genocide doesn't happen, right? If it takes a few more cases in the International Court of Justice to prevent those, I'm fine. I'm fine with that, seriously. So that's it's an incentive both on the US to intervene, to avoid this extra cost, to avoid the scrutiny of the Court of Justice and the international community. And it's also in the incentive, there's also an incentive for the parties involved, as I told you, not to commit those crimes in the first place, because they do not want the US intervening, they do not want military intervention from more powerful countries, right? But now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to try and explain how the UN works in this situation, right? What is the UN? It's basically all of most of the countries of the world collectively decided on a few things that they think are important. And we think that shows that countries actually do have some responsibility on the international community. That's why the UN exists. That's why it was formed. That's its purpose, right? And especially the Security Council is an institution that says, you know, the most powerful countries in the world will have this sort of meeting every once in a while to prevent terrible things from happening. That's what the Security Council is supposed to do. And what we're seeing now is that it fails miserably at its task, right? The UN doesn't do its job very well. Why doesn't it do its job, though? And that's what we're trying to fix here, ladies and gentlemen. Because right now it tries to do those things by sending peacekeepers, for example, like military forces that subscribe to the UN. And we think that the UN has proven it's not very good at handling military operations. What it is really good at, though, is conducting investigations, sending observers, independent observers, is handling the courts. Those things are the specialties, in a way, of the UN, right? So we want a division, basically, of labor, in a way, in those situations. What we want is we want the UN to do the things that it's very good at, which is the investigation and the judging of the situation in the end. And we want countries like the US, who are probably not very good at doing independent investigations, as Iraq has shown, for example, right? But they're pretty damn good at doing military interventions. So what we're telling you is that we already have the UN. The UN already has the responsibility to prevent those kinds of situations. But we want to, instead of having it send its own forces, we are trying to find a method here where the UN, through doing what it's good at doing, forces the countries that are actually capable, that have the capability to stop those kinds of situations, it forces them, or at least it incentivizes them, to go in and to stop those kinds of situations. So, what have I told you today? Because our measure provides an incentive both for powerful countries to intervene and stop crimes before they happen, because it provides an incentive to the parties involved not to commit those crimes in the first place, and because this, when considering the role of the UN and the best way to allocate its resources and its strengths, this will solve the problem. We're proud to propose this motion.
Thank you very much to the member of the government, I'd like to invite the member of the opposition to continue their case. Order.
When asked whether or not they were told us that of countries that we're talking about, they mentioned China, Russia, and the United States. I'm not sure that's true, but let's pretend we agree with them and ask what better incentive do they have not to take part in international criminal court if they know they're going to be held accountable for things they actually had no control over. People sign into moral agreements, believe that they will be able to control their own behavior. If they lose that, they kind of leave. Now, I actually asked the POI about this, and they said to me, I prefer a world where I prevent genocide. Two problems with that. One problem with that, if the Americans do not sign these agreements, they are not obligated to go and save you. Therefore, you're no longer scared that the Americans will come over, and genocide could still happen. But we're going to do more than that today. Me and my partner today are going to show you why actually, if the United States and these handful of countries do act, you will have more genocide, more problems, and bigger shit. And therefore, we were going to win. How are we going to do this? We're going to talk about the nature of these things, and we're going to talk about an argument called the Second Intifada through the Serbian lens, which actually is the only way me and my team partner can involve both our countries in one argument. Now, let's talk about the nature of things. We've already heard from First Opposition that they are very complex. Beyond that, when they are botched up, when getting into them is botched up, they're botched up pretty well. Where have we seen this? We've seen this in Nam, where the idea was to help certain governments in southern Vietnam maintain their freedom. That didn't work out very well. We've seen this in Lebanon, where Israel actually tried to intervene in a civil war over there, ending up with 18 years dying in Lebanese mud. But let's move over to that. There is an information gap. Now, they come and tell us, listen, we'll get over the information gap about what's happening on the ground through the help of Mossad and MI5. I'll add the CIA. I just have one question. Is this the same Mossad and MI5 and 6 that told us that there are WMDs in Iraq? Is this the same intelligence community that was unable to find out about ISIS until it was already beheading the half of Iraq? Is this the same ones who today cannot actually tell us what the situation is in Iran? Mr. Speaker, intelligence gathering is a complex issue. Intelligence gathering in a war zone is even more complex because you don't know who you can trust. We'll talk more about that later. I have no reason to believe that the West will be so much better. Why is this important? Because if you're going to intervene, you better be damn sure you know what you're doing. You cannot say the reasonable You have experts upon experts who got it wrong again and again throughout history by using intelligence. No, thank you. We actually don't think that there's any reason whatsoever to assume that it's okay to come later on and say you should have known this. Even in the worst atrocity that happened on human history, which is the Holocaust in World War II, we know today that President Roosevelt, focusing completely on gathering intelligence from the Third Reich, was not clear of the extent of the Holocaust committed upon the Jews. One of the reasons that bombed while Dresden was bombed kaput. Yes, I used kaput. Okay? So, we've seen that. Why is this so problematic? So you have this problem of information. You have this. Let's look at the Second Intifada through Serbian eyes, and how does this work? In 2001, during the Taba attack, something very peculiar happens to the Middle Eastern peace process. In fact, you could say that is when it died. Yasser Arafat, then the leader of the PLO, decides for some reason to start releasing prisoners en masse, a lot of them rapists, thugs, and people who are not necessarily political. Furthermore, we see mass incitement within Palestinian territory, under Palestinian territory and Palestinian control. This comes very odd because actually the Taba talks that were happening 3 weeks before this started were actually quite beneficial for the Palestinians. And there was the question why this happened. Well, Yasser Arafat is now dead, and today we know. Yasser Arafat basically looked at what happened in 1999 when NATO interfered in Serbia and developed a theory. And the theory was that if he burns up the Holy Land, we will see a world in which there will be so much problems happening, including humanitarian crisis, including crimes against humanity and such, that NATO indeed will also come and bomb Israel to their benefit. This means that there's a brand new strategy in the working. A strategy where actually it is better for you to be a greater victim. It is better for you to create a situation where some crimes against humanity happen because you hope that people will come over. That will take you in a second. This law will make it so that they will know countries are scared not to come over, and therefore they will try to incentivize people to go through, and we'll see how they do this in a second. Yes?
So you're suggesting that the country will voluntarily submit to genocide so that the US intervenes. That's what you're saying, right?
My dear boy, listen, you've said, you need to read the motion. Not genocide. Crimes against humanity. That's a much lower bar to pass. How can this work? Well, for start, if I'm firing rockets on Israeli civilians, how about I do it from a civilian area? The moment I do so, then the Israel, which will decide to respond, will hit a civilian building, maybe out of a UN school. Crime against humanity. Does the United States now need to intervene or not? Very interesting question indeed, I think. But wait, let's look at the gas attack that we recently had in Syria. We still are today not entirely sure whether it was indeed the Syrian army who used the gas, or was it rebels who took over this area. Why? Because these situations are very complex. A mass grave, for example. Is this a mass grave that was created during a genocide style of things we've seen in World War II and in Yugoslavia? Or is this a mass grave of people, combatants who died in legitimate warfare and then were put in a mass grave in order to make it look worse? Okay? We know that people who actually work for Reuters and stuff like that of bombs and like to take pictures of the children being hurt, less so of combatants. Was that genocide, or what's going on here? Was that human crimes against humanity? These are questions that are hard to answer. It's especially hard to answer. No, okay? If you have incentive to give this sort of disinformation, if you have incentive to call people over for more of this. So what you actually see is a situation where we have more incentive to create instances where crimes against humanity are possible, to create instances where it'll be easy to blame the other side against crimes against humanity. Now, remember what I said about this thing being complex? This actually means that right now the United States, in the theory where they actually signed it, where they probably won't, will actually have to interfere quickly because they will be very worried. But they won't have time to check things. They also are not very good at it, as I stated, and we will see more botched up jobs because they won't know who's against who. God, we still today, after almost 3-4, what has it been? We don't know how to intervene in Syria. We don't know who would we help. We don't want the United States feeling that there's a time pressure to do something, and we don't think it's fair to come later on in retrospect and tell them what they could have or could not know. And finally, Mr. Speaker, we don't want them doing these things because they need to tick a legal box. We want them to stay there for a duration. We don't want them to just be there in order to be able to say, you can't accuse me of anything, I was there. So if you want to create more genocides, more crimes against humanity, if you want to create more reasons to create disinformation, by all means go with government. But if you like human beings, opposition wins.
Thank you to the member of the opposition. We now come to the business order. Order. Business end of the debate. We await the whip speaker for the government bench.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, three main things that came today into this debate. First of all, it was on the first half of this debate that the first proposition showed you exactly why we do have the obligation to actually intervene and to to punish those states that to prevent those crimes against humanity, and why we do have this moral obligation, and what it exactly means to have this capacity. What my partner showed you is why it is more effective to do so, and how we're going to actually prevent those crimes against humanity to actually happen, and why this is not going to make it worse, as the opposition was trying to show it. Before I move with the whip of this debate, I'm going to talk about a bit about what the previous speaker said. So he was asking about what is crime against humanity. Exactly what it is right now. What we believe it is, that all those crimes that affect all those crimes that we believe that should not be happening, and we believe that the states should prevent them. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. Try to give incentives to the countries to actually prevent to do so. He gave the example of a lot of examples. I will engage with Germany, for example. That it was the people. The problem was that actually they didn't take, they didn't do stuff quickly enough, and the people in Germany, actually, ladies and gentlemen, they were feeling guilty for a long time after for not doing action. So we want people to actually do something, and we want the states that have the capacity to actually get in those states to take action and prevent those crimes. That's what we have been telling you all along. They trying to convince us that the states are going on itself to show that they are victims and actually commit crimes against humanity. We totally fail to believe this, and we don't this, because exactly that's ridiculous. We say that actually what happened in Srebrenica or in the other parts of the world, in Rwanda, people don't want these things to happen. And I'm going to move forward now to why this is not going to happen, and why we are morally obligated to do so. So first of all, we say that we have to intervene because those are crimes that could happen to actually everyone. Those are crimes that actually, by preventing them, we set an example. We set an example, and we say that the countries that, because they're preventing it, it shows to the whole world that it's something that shouldn't be done. And that shows that those crimes are not going to keep on doing. We're saying, as opposed to what the opposition is saying, that we do have the information. And why we do have the information? Because we do have the agencies, we do have really good access and everything. We believe that in the situation that we didn't do anything to prevent those things, is because the countries didn't have an actual incentive to intervene in these situations. And that's exactly what we're doing. In the case what the previous speaker said, that the countries are not going to sign, we're saying, no, that it will come later, not now, thank you. We're saying that people that are are the victims of that the crimes against humanity, they don't have any other way to defend themselves. So the countries that do have the capacity, they have the military, they have the experience, they should and have to give back to those communities, to give back to the world. We're saying that those are when minorities are being threatened, when civilians are dying, we need to intervene, because this will set the moral standards that we need in this society in order to thrive. We're saying that it's okay for the international court to actually take this kind of decisions to set an example to show that this is what should be happening in the world. And yes, if it's gonna save more lives, as we have showed you that it is gonna save more lives because it's gonna be more effective, as my partner showed you, exactly this is why we want to do this. There was a POI about whether the people who live in the other countries are gonna feel bad. Actually, we're saying that feeling guilty, not now, we're saying that feeling guilty about something that not preventing, it's it's more important. So we need to prevent it. Actually, not and not having to pay all these reparations and actually get into these countries to help them. This will actually consume time and money and people from the countries that are going to be judged for the international code. So they will do it, and they have to do it. Yes.
Mass human rights violations are happening in Syria right now. Could you tell us which one of the factions would you like the United States to support in the campaign you're proposing, and why? Mass human rights violations are happening in Syria right now. To say if the United States now intervenes, which one of the factions would you like them to support, and why?
Actually, they would, if the crimes against humanity are being done, as we said, that the UN exactly has the means to actually say and have the observers there, as my partner showed you, and it's exactly the one that should be there. We say that they should prevent those crimes against humanity. This means that if they can stop the war, if they can have this information that says to be able to stop the war between those two, they should do it in any cause. And we're saying that they are responsible if they don't do so, and they should intervene, ladies and gentlemen. So what exactly my partner showed you is that it's more effective. And why it's more effective? Because now we see that the UN is doing the main part, taking all the important things that are the things that you should know and what is happening. And the International Court has the obligation to actually take part in it. So it's forcing the countries that actually do have the military and actually have the capacity to help those countries to make them to make the reparations after something bad has been done, like a crime against humanity. We say that those should help, and we're saying that it will stop those situations from happening in these situations. We're saying that also the group of people or the majority or whoever is doing those crimes, these hate crimes, these crimes against humanity, they will stop in fear of the countries that will come to rescue them, to actually help in this situation. We're saying that this is going to happen because of the international pressure that is going to be given. Even if they don't want to follow the rules of the international court, we're saying that it matters if the whole other world knows that they should have done something, but they didn't, especially within their country, but also outside of the country. So for all these reasons, because we've shown you it's going to be effective, we beg you to oppose.
I give you.
Thank you to the whip speaker for the government side. And now to complete the debate and to finalise the opposition case, I'd like to invite
You cannot turn it.
the honourable opposition whip. And please, before you do start, I know it's a long debate and it's very hot in here, but please shut up back there. It's really loud. Like this. Hear the gun out.
It's just 7 minutes now.
Yeah.
Okay. Two things. A, why we think that it's not justified to blame someone for something for which they're obviously not guilty. B, why conflicts are gonna get even worse. Before that, a couple of points for rebuttal. Number one, they come out and say, yeah, we're gonna give incentive to governments of powerful states to go out and intervene. Maybe, yes. But bigger problem is, A, they will have an incentive to intervene badly because they have to intervene as soon as possible. When they intervene as soon as possible, they don't get to check and update the information they have. Exactly the POI asked by my partner about Syria. Who is guilty in the Syria right now? No one knows. But exactly because the United States of America will be afraid to go on the wrong or the other side, and exactly because they want to intervene as soon as possible, they're not going to update on it. They're just going to lucky guess and assume based on what they have right now, because they don't really have the time to go through all of that information. Because the more they wait, the bigger the risk is that in the end, crimes against humanity might happen in even worse way than they did right now, and therefore in the end, they end up being guilty. With that, bad information, bad intervention, bad prevention of conflict, bad post-conflict society. Even bigger issue to the other side to actually create even bigger crimes against humanity, because your goal is to have the West intervene and to have the West on your side. So even if you don't have crimes against humanity in the status quo, you can start and using chemical weapons, because you know that is exactly the red line the United States of America needs in order to come in to intervene. What's the problem with that? Bigger crimes. But more on that in my constructed. Also, they come up and say agencies will gather information. I don't know if they were listening to my partner, but I think that my partner gave enough explanations why agencies aren't right all the time and why effectively they actually do make mistakes. But even if they're not wrong, even if they gathered all the information, it's not only about information and statistics. It's more than that. It's about identity. It's about the nature of the conflict. It's about understanding the society and the way the conflict happens. So for example, if I tell the United States of America, go and intervene in Central African Republic, will they know who should they support in that situation? Will they understand the conflict that is happening there? No. They will just probably randomly pick someone who instinctively seems like someone who they should support, and then in the end, God knows what happened. But they washed their hands, they intervened. That is. Now why do we think? Before that, why we think this is not justified. Let's talk about guilty. We think that when it comes to capacity, that is exactly something that is questionable. Even if you are facing the objective criteria, i.e. money, army, power, etc., in order for you to have a successful intervention, which is the incentive for you to go and intervene, you need to know more about that. You need to know more about that conflict, which is something that these states obviously don't have. But if we make them intervene, they will not even have an incentive to get, because the reaction is, let's just react as soon as possible so we can wash our hands out of it. So that means their capacity is actually becoming smaller. If they were powerful and they wanted to intervene, if we don't pressure them, they will gather the information, they will try to get introduced within the conflict, and then they will intervene. If we pressure them to intervene in that particular situation, that the entire other part of no is something that isn't relevant for them as much as it was before, because now it's only the accent on the fact that they need to intervene. Second issue that we have why it's not justified. It's about the criteria. The criteria is pure randomness. You're not powerful because you promised that you will protect everyone in the world. You're powerful because you simply picked to do so and you were lucky enough to do that. That is the same. Making powerful states to be responsible for this is exactly like saying that every guy in this world is guilty for every raping that happened, because every guy in this world has a potential of preventing raping, but they didn't do that, which means that every guy should go out right now and protect everyone. No, that's not how that happens. You're guilty because you were related to that conflict. You're guilty because you contributed to the conflict happening. You're guilty because in some way you're related to it, and in this situation, none of it. But what is the biggest issue? The biggest issue is transfer of responsibility, and that is why it is not justified. Now the focus is not on the countries that are causing the conflict or causing the crimes against humanity. Now the focus is on the West. So we're not going to blame Serbs anymore for the genocide in Srebrenica. Let's blame them because they were the ones who were supposed to go and intervene. No, that's not how it happens. We all know who's the guilty one. Before I go to conflicts even worse, yes?
They don't have to understand the intricacies of the conflict. They just have to logistically stop armies killing themselves. So we do not have to support any of the factions. We can just disarm them.
Exactly. Firstly, who will they disarm if they don't know who's the good guy and who is the bad guy? That is the first issue. But the second issue is conflicts get even worse. How? So now we're all saying, yeah, West is here and West is going to come and West is going to be the one intervening. What does that mean? That means when you have conflicts, when you have the opposing group, and that opposing group is just waiting for someone to come and support them and intervene, those opposing groups will have very, very, very big incentive to actually create field with crimes against humanity. Why? So they can call the West, and the West has to come, and the West has to intervene. The West do so because they don't want to be prosecuted for something that, based on clash point number one, they're obviously not guilty for. But even if they are, they're not. But they will have to generally intervene. So what is the issue with that? You're creating a legitimate ground for West to be incentivized to intervene. Problem A, bigger crimes will obviously be caused, because some crimes against humanity maybe wouldn't happen if opposing groups were not aware of the fact that if these crimes happen, West will not come and intervene. So that is the problem number one. The problem number two is that this is going to happen more often, because now whenever you have some conflict and you're not really powerful enough to fight against it, all we need to do, Western states come and the Western states intervene. So what is the problem with that? You have more conflicts which will be happening. What is the issue with that? That means that West has to intervene very soon. And then we get back to the exactly with which we started our point. If you have more conflicts, the issue is that then they have to intervene very, very fast. What does that mean? Not gathering information, not analyzing information. But even bigger issue is,
Why will they stay and do the post-conflict society and the entire other things when that's not their incentive? When you choose your intervention, you choose information you gather, you analyze the situation, you intervene, and then you stay there. And then you help these societies progress. You help them reach reconciliation. You help them become a peaceful society. Right now, what you do is you prevent the crimes against humanity that probably happened in the first place because we knew that you were going to come and intervene. But after the intervention is done, because someone forced you into being there, and because you're not even sure if that intervention is secure and done in an efficient way, you have literally no incentive to stay there and put your fingers into the situation more than you actually have to do it. We think that is very problematic because often after interventions, the biggest issues happen within post-conflict society in reaching reconciliation, which is something in which Western countries tend to show themselves as actually successful one. If they don't have the interest to do that, it is very questionable who is going to do it. What do you get from closing opposition? Firstly, you get that we really doubt this moral obligation and never really get an explanation of why, because solidarity just sounds too fluffy and never really elaborated in a good way. We show to you that guilty much more than just capability. But even moreover, if that is not relevant, the things that are relevant are A, B, the way that happened, and C, what happens after the intervention, in which you obviously see that be as efficient, will not be as incentivized, and obviously not guilty. For all reasons, proud to oppose. Thank you.